for the work Gemma is presenting, and really happy for joining the discussion even more after Liana's your great presentation. Thank you for that. Really happy also to participate in the Q&A afterwards, and I'm sure there will be many questions. So really, as a short introduction, I think participants here are well familiar with the G+ and the work we are doing. Ruby, thanks for presenting the data statistics. Obviously, that's the backbone of the work we are doing. Also, I think most are familiar with the good practice guidance. We develop the Safe by Design projects we conduct in the G+, and also the sharing of incidents and sharing of learnings. But I think the G+ is mostly known for the activities and work we are doing on safety issues, and maybe less known the activities we also do in the health arena. And I think, Liliana, what you mentioned in your presentation is shocking. The individual quotes. I mean, that's really gets really close. And I think it's more and more important that we look into the health aspects and also looking in the well-being aspects and the physical but also psychological things. And that's why I'm really happy also. I've been with the G+ since 2018. That since then we actually start quite to dig deeper into the health arena, and happy to work also with the Energy Institute. I've been with the EI even longer, that we have the resources also there. I mean, the EI is known for their work on human factors and also the hearts and mind system. And I think there's so much we can learn also from other industries and the oil and gas industry. We just need to adapt it in the right way for wind operations offshore and onshore. And last but not least, obviously through the Energy Institute, we also had the connection with University of Portsmouth and really who used to do work in relation to oil and gas activities and recommended fitness standards for oil and gas. And that actually gave the seed for also doing something focusing on ladder climbing in the first instance, but also go into the physical or fitness for work Gemma is talking about. The fitness work is complemented also, maybe just to flag a couple of things, with the medical guidance. So we also work with the EI Health Committee on providing medical guidance that is bespoke for wind and for work in offshore and onshore wind, and to help existing standards, medical standards, for example, provided by OE UK, to become more bespoke, to move more bespoke to the tasks that are actually relevant in the wind industry, rather than to take something that's bespoke for oil and gas and leave it with this. We also have a current work stream on welfare, and that's really close to our heart, even if it's not easy to really address what actually helps. I mean, toilets is always first on the agenda, but there is so much more we can do with existing, but also importantly with future infrastructures and assets. And lately, also, I put here the data. I think we also, obviously, we base our work program on the incident data, but we don't have much health-related indicators included in the data, and that's what we are also working on, to get more into the health data and to build up a data baseline for this. Psychological health is even more tricky, and we used to work with HSE UK actually on a research project on this to develop a tool. But again, that's what I would like to make a point here and lead over to Gemma, and very happy to start then the discussion afterwards. Gemma, thank you for presenting on the work you're doing for the G+ and with the G+ members on fitness to work. You're on mute, Gemma.
Has to be said at least once a meeting, isn't it? You're on mute. So thank you, Beate, for the introduction, and thank you, Ruby, for inviting us here to talk today. I apologise about my voice and sounding a bit like Barry White, but these things happen. So today's presentation will focus on fitness to work standards and how they link in with human factors. And Liliana, it was nice to hear some of your work and actually some of the real direct comparisons and similarities we found. But in doing so, I think we first need to discuss the interaction between medical and fitness standards and the differences between these two, as they are often used so interchangeably. Both of them really involve physical assessments, but each of them have evolved from very different perspectives. So consequently, the results provided to the examining experts and the employers are of different information, and these regard the suitability for employment. Now, used together, they can really optimise the recruitment and retention of workers, ensuring that they not only have the health, but the physical capabilities to do the job. But as I said, they are distinctly different, excuse me, and I will just go through some of those differences. So when we look at a medical standard, this is undertaken by a qualified medical professional. And what they're doing is they're looking for underlying health disorders that may put an individual at risk or impede them from doing their job. They base their decision on their medical knowledge of the health disorders, and they use normalized data for age and sex in combination with the risks of the job to make decisions on suitability and safety for employment. If we look at fitness to work assessments, this directly measures physical capacity to do the job. And this is based on the most physically demanding aspects of the job, performed at agreed minimum performance standards using methods of best practice. So this is where we start seeing that link with human factors in determining what are the jobs, what are the key movements and risks and requirements involved, and actually how can we make it a minimum standard to reduce the load on the individual, but also still get the job done. And this is why they're minimum performance standards. What this means is, because it's based on the job, they are age and sex free. Because if you have a team of service technicians, when they're on a turbine, they will be expected to do exactly the same thing, irrespective of their age or sex. What this means is when we conduct these assessments, it doesn't have to be a medical professional doing them. It can be an individual trained up within those assessments, as criteria is based on pass, borderline or fail. Individuals within borderline categories can be given support from the employers in terms of improving physical fitness and well-being to actually move into pass categories. Now, the information from fitness to work can be passed to both the employer and back to the medical examiner to help them inform the decision on individual suitability to work. And if we carry on with this, and if we look at the benefits of assessing fitness to work, again, this links in with the work specifically done within the human factors domain, because ultimately, we're able to identify people who cannot meet the physical demands of the work. But in doing that, what we provide to the employer is a reduction in turnover and worker replacement. This ultimately reduces training time, but it also gives employers a duty of care and a way to look after their employees by reducing injuries. Productivity can be increased because people are able to move their bodies in a correct manner. That means they're not going to get as many injuries. And you can increase productivity from the fact that individuals will not be as fatigued because they have the physical capacity to do the job. One of the important aspects, I think, that is often overlooked is what this has and the impact this has on the teams. If we look at service technicians, they are working in isolated areas as a team, perhaps of 3 or more, and this can build cohesiveness and confidence because everyone knows that the individuals within that team are fit to at least the minimum standards to do the jobs that they're being required to ask. And also importantly, and again, it goes on with what Liliana was saying, is this duty of care. It means that we can identify weaknesses and problem areas within technicians. So for example, hips, knees and ankles, and it means we can tailor support. And because of the type of fitness to assessment we do and because of where they are grounded in, that helps us develop health related and training programs directed to the job. So in developing the fitness to work standard for offshore wind technicians, we implemented an internationally recognised methodology. And this methodology has been used worldwide by militaries. It has also been used in the UK for emergency services such as the Maritime Coast Guard Agency, fire brigade service or fire service, sorry, the RLNI, the Nauru Ambulance Service, and many, many more. So it is a well-established framework. And the most fundamental building block of that is the job task analysis, which is directly related to human factors. And I will go into that in more detail on the next slide. But essentially what this does is it helps us to determine the most physically demanding jobs. Now, that is, if we look in terms of fitness components, in terms of our strength, our aerobic capacity, our ability to move our body into the positions that it needs to go into and sustain, and to actually undertake the coordinative movement patterns that are needed. Now, having established these most physically demanding tasks, we look at them in terms of their method of best practice. So what is the most efficient way? What is the safety critical way to perform them? What is the way in terms of the risk assessment they have been set? And we standardize these, set our minimum performance standards that are then sanctioned by either the organisation or the industry as a whole, depending on the type of standard that you are recommending. Having actually established these, it means we can then go on to understanding the physical demands this actually places on individuals and at what percentage of their maximum capability these tasks should actually represent, because you don't want people working at their maximum to do a task that is going to last all day, because after 20 minutes they will be too fatigued. So that's a really important step to understand. We then have a number of options in what kind of tests we offer to assess physical capacity. These can either be actually asking people to do the job. They can be simulations of people doing the job if it's not possible to be on location or have specific bits of kit, or they can be, again, one step removed, a predictive selection test. So this assesses a direct component of fitness, so for example strength or aerobic capacity, in the forms of easy to run tests, so a grip strength test, or it might be a bike test, or I think most people are familiar with a step test, and these predict individuals' ability to do the job. Having done this, we assess the validity and reliability of these assessments, and we also look at adverse impact. So at this stage, we are able to provide companies with an adverse impact that says, you've set your minimum standards at this, looking at a large cohort of individuals, this is the specific group, so it might be females, that will be adversely impacted. Is there any way in which the job can be managed, the task can be managed? Can it be made easier? Can it be a two-person rather than a one-person job? Can a pulley system be used instead of someone have to manually handling something? And can that then the performance level be changed? If the answer is no, because it might be a safety critical task, for example, like a casualty evacuation, those adverse impacts have been identified and acknowledged. So that's a brief overview on the process that we go through, but I just wanted to focus more on the task analysis. And the reason for doing that is because this really links mainly in with the human factors element and making sure that we're identifying where the risks are, the tasks that need to be optimized, and looking at how we can do that. So within the job task analysis, what we looked at was service campaigns, and we broke these down into the component parts of the job, which were then analysed in terms of their technical specifications. So we looked at the specifications of the turbines themselves in terms of spaces that individuals needed to get into, distances they needed to climb, etc. We then looked at the frequency and the duration of the task being undertaken, and the rest breaks that were taken not only between different job tasks, but also within the tasks themselves. We looked at clothing ensembles and loads that were being carried while undertaking the task. So, for example, ladder climbing is done with approximately 13 kilos of additional load on the body. So we looked at different aspects of this. We also looked at the environmental conditions and how this may impact technique and also other varying factors such as hydration. We then looked at the methods of best practice and looked at then establishing our minimum performance standards based on a number of factors. From this, we could then get them sanctioned through the G+. Now, the job task analysis itself used multiple methods so we could have a cross-validation within what we were doing. We used and we spoke to over 226 subject matter experts within the industry with an age range between 21 to 65 years old. On average, they had 7 years experience within the industry, and we managed to work across 8 companies within the G+, covering 5 countries and 18 models of turbines. How we started this off, because it initiated in COVID, was a number of interviews and focus groups, and we validated that with surveys on a larger sample. As soon as the restrictions were lifted, we ourselves as researchers actually undertook a number of the tasks to understand what they actually involved, and we measured and monitored technicians during a 3-day service campaign through a physical activity diary, but also through GPS and physical demands in terms of heart rate and metabolic equivalents. What that allowed us to do was kind of triangulate through, and having established all of that, we went to our operating procedures to make sure we were following, and the methods of best practice were to standard operating procedures. So in doing that, we identified our essential tasks, and these were categorized as either infrequent. And what that means, if something is essential and infrequent, it doesn't occur very regularly. So, for example, we heard in the last presentation that if lifts are out of action, or in some turbines there aren't lifts, individuals need to do prolonged ladder climbing from the TP up to the nacelle, and that can be up to 120 metres. We also see casualty evacuation is an absolutely essential task, but thankfully is an infrequent task. When we looked at essential frequent tasks, these were tasks that were being performed during every service, if not every day, service technicians were on site. These were our short ladder climbs, so for an example, from the vessel onto the TP. These were manual handling tasks broken down into lifting and carrying and torque and tensioning. And then we had our working in restricted spaces. Now, each of these, and I don't have time to go into it today, have the minimum performance standards associated with them. What this led us to develop, having determined these tasks and then conducting an 18-month-long test development study, we were able to recommend the following. So you can see down the side with the red box, the essential tasks, and then along the top, we have the different methods of fitness assessment. So whether that's a predictive selection test, so a PST, a DST, which is a direct task simulation, or a DTM, which is a direct task measurement. Now, there was 2 main reasons for offering a variety of test measures. One is that this is a global recommendation. Within a number of countries, there are restrictions on how you can assess your employees' ability to work. from a fitness perspective. So, for example, in some states in America, you cannot take any physical measurements. It has to be direct task simulations. Secondly, what we've seen in some legal cases is that they have fallen short where the employers have not been able to offer an alternative method of assessment for the same parameter of fitness. So this allows for that to happen. Within the G+, the organisations have chosen that their first priority, or the test selection they will go to first, would be predictive selection tests, as these are likely to be easier to facilitate. Now, these are a combination of different tests looking at aerobic fitness, our grip, endurance and body mass index, and also measures of lower body strength, such as our isometric mid-thigh pull. Now, this is, in terms of where we are at the moment, we are looking at validating this further within the industry and the reliability and the viability of it, and also the impact this may have on the workforce. So that's the next stages. I'm more than happy to answer any questions as we go forward, as I appreciate that is a very whistle-stop tour. So thank you very much for listening.